is over, and then you stop. Okay? Now, after this pre-test, okay, subjects are assigned to training. And during training, what they do, and this is a highly well-researched protocol, they are given 160 repetitions in a blocked manner of the task. So now you are not asked to perform the task as fast as possible, but you are required to maintain accuracy. And if you go into this training mode, which would take like 20 minutes, then we again measure your performance, what young adults show are very clear improvements. Okay? This I would term fast learning. Okay? So concurrently with the training experience, although note that during training you are not asked to perform the sequence as fast as possible. The only thing to maintain is accuracy. Still, we see that speed improves. Okay? And as I'll show you, young and old subjects do very few errors in such a task. Okay? I'll show you the data later on, but you should believe me that very few occasional errors are performed. So, in fact, this improvement is with very few, if at all, errors in the performance. So that's fast learning. If then we ask these subjects that have been trained in this protocol to return to the lab, and at different time points, each of these blocks would be a different time point, they are tested for half a minute. How many sequences, correct sequences, one can perform, okay, at different time points after the end of the session. What we see is that performance does not change. It does not improve above the performance attained at the end of the session, but then it does not return to the initial performance before the training was initiated. Okay? Now, this latent phase, we know, would take about 6 to 8 hours or until sleep is allowed. However, the main surprise is that if we test performance the next morning, then what we see, that in fact almost universally, this is true for young adults, all of them actually show what we call delayed gains. So they actually improve beyond the performance at the end of the training session. Okay? So the idea is that something which was afforded during the session, okay, a process is initiated, and then it takes time, and although later it still continues, then you go into sleep, and the next day, if you want, the whole benefits of the training experience are actually available for you for performance. So we have a latent process which results in delayed gains. This slow between session learning or improvement is one of the main measures in human performance of the procedural memory consolidation phase. We say we learn, but then we take time before we can express the gains that were actually acquired during the training experience. Now, once this process is completed, we're left with very long-term memory. Okay? So now you're not going to lose your performance gains for very long time intervals, weeks and months. Now, importantly, these delayed gains are also expressed in terms of accuracy. Now, it's true that subjects make very few mistakes initially, but they do no mistakes in general by 24 hours post-training. Okay? So it means that your speed has improved and also your accuracy. So if you accept Fitts' law or any such formulation, one would have to say that here, the next day, we're actually at a different brain state compared to brain state that we were in during the initial training session. Now, just to show you that this is universal, there are many other laboratory and paradigms where these effects can be shown, but I'll show you these data just to show you that this does not relate only to the performance of movement sequences, one. And the second point that this slide brings forward is that unlike motor sequences, the learning of motor sequences, some types of skills do not require sleep in order to afford the expression of delayed gains. So what you see here are subjects that have been normalized, their performance has been normalized, so that would be 0, by the end of a training session in which they are asked to discriminate between da and ga, okay, in noise. So you can think of trying to discriminate da or ga, okay, syllable to syllabi, and syllables, and you will try to discriminate in increasing noise levels, okay? So that would be your ability normalized here by the end of a training session. What you can see is for the first 6 hours, most of us, some of us are really fast, but most of us do not show any gains in performance. However, 6 hours later, some of us need some more time, most of us do show delayed gains in performance, okay? These are individuals that return to the lab at different time points, okay, after the training session, which is here at time point 0. And of course, this is empty because they went home, but the next day when they are retested, you can see that everyone is actually doing much better compared to the performance after a very intensive training session on discriminating syllables in noise. Okay, so 2 points. 1, time can suffice. In some tasks, sleep is not necessary, although it's beneficial, okay, but it's not a necessary condition. And second is that delayed gains can be expressed even in completely perceptual tasks, not only in motor tasks. Okay, so let me sum up. What I would like to suggest is that memory consolidation phase is really a latent phase which is triggered by the learning experience, wherein neuronal changes evolve before being fully expressed as delayed, or if you want, offline gains. And of course, once this process has been completed, then we are left with very long-lasting memory. However, there's also a sad part to this very exhilarating story. And that is that even if we're given an excellent training opportunity, okay? A training session which has been optimized and we're really showing large gains in performance, okay? The sad point is that this may not suffice in generating effective procedural memory because consolidation processes can be blocked even by subsequent experiences. Of course, not all experiences, very specific experiences, but still, experience that would occur in the post-training time window can still block the generation of long-term memory, which suggests that these processes actually are taking place during the hours after the training experience has been completed. Okay? This is what we call interference. And let me just show you how it looks in performance. So again, these are young adults. Okay, I have the references, by the way, in all of these slides, please, I hope. So you train in A, this is your performance before, after. During the evening, you don't see any delayed gains because sleep was not afforded. This has been run in a sleep lab. And then the next morning, there are very robust delayed gains. However, if given the very same training experience and the very same amount of learning, 2 hours after the initial training session, subjects are given a training session on B, that is the other or the mirror reverse movement sequence. Same hand, same movement, but a different order, okay? And that's B, 160 repetitions. What you can see is that by the evening, this is measurement for A, you don't see any difference, but that's expected. However, by the next morning, there's no delayed gains, and in fact, some individuals might even start to show some forgetting. That is a drop in performance compared to the post-training performance. Okay? But this will mean interference. However, if the training experience on B is delayed by 8 hours after the termination of the initial training on A, then we don't have any interference, which means that there is a few hours, a window of opportunity for interference, which takes place a few hours after a given training experience. But once we've gone beyond this window, okay, 6 to 8 hours have passed, we are now immune to interference. The process has advanced to such a stage that a different experience now cannot cause interference. So we say consolidation has been completed, and so memory has been established, and we can't harm it by a competing experience. Okay, so let me give an interim perspective, now looking at what I've just showed you in terms of human behavior, and try to argue that what you see here is actually a reflection, okay? Is actually a reflection of biological processes, and I'm going to be very bold, okay? At a cellular level, okay? So this is biological processes at a cellular level reflected in human performance, okay? So the model is the following one. There are many such models, but that's my favorite model, okay? It's called the synaptic tagging and capture, and it says the following. If we train on A, okay, that's a neuron, okay, for those of you, so it's a cartoon of the neuron. That's the cell body, okay, that's the nucleus, that's where you have DNA, okay? And experience, okay, for example, performing sequence A, okay, with its unique order of movement, actually says that these synapses of this motor cell related, let's say, to this opposition movement have been activated consistently. However, other synapses of the same cell have not. That's B, okay? So what we say is that this experience generates 2 events. One of them, a tag is generated. It's a chemical tag saying, hey, I'm the one who experienced these movements. I was the one participating, okay? This is a motor neuron. I'm the one participating in the task. But the second event is signaled to the nucleus, okay? Which actually induces protein synthesis. And then we have DNA turning to RNA, RNA to proteins. Proteins are then arranged and they are packed, put into packages, okay? And then they are returned. And the question is, where would they return? They would return to the specific synapses of A, okay? And once they are inserted in synapse A or its vicinity, we suddenly have an ability to perform the task which is much better than we had before. We actually have better neural machinery, okay? But this, of course, is effective only after a latent phase at the moment where these proteins generated in the cell nucleus become effective in the local structure, okay? Now, what this model actually explains, it explains the following. It explains why consolidation takes time. The reason is that there are lots of molecular events, okay, which need to take place, lots of movements of PRPs are plasticity-related products, okay, which we have to generate de novo, okay? We have to go to our genes and generate the structural elements of new synapses. And all this, of course, would take time. It also explains, this model, the specificity. Why, when we train on sequence A, we don't improve on sequence B. And if we train on sequence B, we don't improve on sequence A. I only showed you the interference, but this is true as well. And finally, it also explains, the model also explains the interference, because what it says is the following. If after training on A, let's say 2 hours later, before this long process has been completed, B is now given a training experience. Okay, same synapses, but, different synapses on the same neurons. Then a new tag is going to be developed here. And when proteins are shunted back and transported to synapses A, okay, they are actually going to be stolen from A by B with a fresh tag saying, hey, I'm the one to be built. And then what we have is that B is going to be preferentially built rather than A, so we're not going to see the local structural changes reflected in performance and no improvement in A. Okay? I just added this to say that I really simplified a very complex set of processes. Okay? I'm not going to go into the detail. Okay, so 2 points. The first point is that long-term memory is, according to all our current neurobiological models, a process wherein we have structural changes at the neuronal level and synaptic level, and this really means that there is gene expression, novel gene expression, and novel generation of new proteins, which are the building materials of synapses, okay? And moreover, that only specific synapses change, okay? Whether it's repeatedly done or experienced, this is well it's remembered, okay? So they're highly specific changes in highly specific sets of cells, but within those cells, highly specific synapses. The second point is that the establishment of long-term memory is really a process that requires time, okay? The neural changes are initiated by the training experience, but are completed hours later, okay? So this is a process which is triggered by, but distinct from learning. This is what one would term the memory consolidation phase. So, the memory consolidation phase. So what happens in children? Up till now, I showed you data from young adults. These are, most of them, studies done in university students, okay? They might be American, some of them are German, some of them, or most of them are Israeli, but still young adults. The question is what happens in children, and the reason why this is an interesting question is because you would all be familiar with the notion of critical or sensitive periods, okay? Which is the notion that the reshaping or modification of neuronal representation by the environment and experience are much more easier to accomplish in childhood, okay? So there is this notion that children are better learners because their brains are more plastic, okay? And the important thing to remember from this cartoon is that if we have a specific environment, visual environment, okay, then we see changes in the kitten's brain, but not in an adult cat's brain, okay? However, there is a problem, and of course this is a problem in parentheses. So, and the problem is that as I just showed you, okay, and I hope this is your own particular individual experience, adults can learn. Okay, good. Okay, so there's very effective procedural memory in adulthood. So there's a robust potential for neuroplasticity in the adult brain, including in low-level cortical processing areas, which, according to the critical period theory, should be hardwired by the time we get to adulthood. And just to show you, because this is really something which I really like, because it's the human equivalent of the cat experiment I just showed you, and very briefly, I don't have time to go into the details, but you can read the paper if you're interested. This is a study showing changes in visual cortex, where adult cats showed no changes, but this is in humans after being trained in a certain way using a paradigm which was developed during my PhD. Okay? So this is a visual task, and of course there's very nice plasticity there after consolidation. And for the task that I'm using as the main example in arguing my point, the performance of a sequence of finger opposition movement, I and others have been able to show that there are very robust plastic changes in the M1 primary motor cortex contralateral, okay, to the hand performing and training the task, okay, and in adult. So again, we see very robust changes, plasticity in M1 in adult brains, contrary to the notion of critical periods. So, how can we explain the two different elements? Okay, so I'm going to show you 4 experiments very briefly, which address the question of whether children are superior to adults in the acquisition, okay, learning, or consolidation, generating long-term memory for motor skill. Okay, and I'm going to, in all of them, all these experiments are using the very same task that I've just demonstrated. So first, look what we see here. What you see here is a training session in 3 groups, 3 age groups: 9-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 17-year-olds. Okay, and what is very, very clear is that this is initial performance, this is the end of the session, okay, is that you see very parallel learning curves, okay? And it's very different, it's very clear that all 3 age groups learn, okay? That is, improve concurrently with the accumulation of experience in the task, okay? Each data point is performance during half a minute of performing the task as fast and quickly as possible. Now, the next day, this is 24 hours post, you can clearly see that each of these groups actually shows delayed gains. Okay? And then when we test them again 48 hours, they all show very nice retention and some additional gains. Okay? And when we test them 6 weeks post-training, okay, again we see very nice retention. And one group actually shows significant additional gains, and these are the young adults, the 17-year-olds. Okay? So what you see here is actually, just to complete it, okay? Sorry. So children are not superior to adults in acquisition or in consolidation. And what I'm showing you here, just because I promised, is the number of errors. Okay, so 0.4 errors, okay, just to make sure that you see the scale, okay? But you can see that everybody improves during the training session and nobody makes any errors afterwards, after the consolidation phase, okay? It's just to prove to you that this is indeed a new brain state and no speed accuracy trade-off. Okay, so the question is now, if we see that 17-year-olds are as effective in gaining in terms of performance as 9-year-olds or 12-year-olds, okay? Could it be that it's simply a question of being immune to interference, okay? So the next experiment is an experiment which I'm going to show you is we train on A, 2 hours later we train on B, and the next day we test A once again. Okay? And of course we compare it to a situation where no interference is afforded. Okay? And you've seen the data from young adults, university students, so you know that this paradigm is supposed to generate interference of B on A. And these are the results. What you see now are the delta, okay, or the differences in performance the next day compared to post-training performance. Okay, so how much I gained during the consolidation interval. And what you can see that all groups, this is the black bars, with no interference, show very nice delayed gains. Okay? And you can see that with interference, both 9-year-olds and 12-year-olds show somewhat slighter improvement. Okay? But still they show very significant delayed gains. And the differences here are not significant statistically. Okay? However, if you look at the 17-year-olds, you can see the adult pattern. Okay? This is how, this is the pattern that young students or people in their 20s show. Okay? So what this suggests is that there's an age-dependent difference in memory consolidation in that children are less susceptible to interference by a conflicting task. So, could this be an advantage? Because what we saw is significant delayed gains in the 9 and 12-year-olds in a condition of expected interference. There is no interference or no significant interference in this age group before puberty. However, the 17-year-olds showed the adult pattern of interference. So, it could be that children are not susceptible to interference at all. Or it could be that before puberty, procedural memory consolidation processes require less time. Okay? So 2 hours after, I've shown you the data in adults, 8 hours after training, there's no interference even in adults. Okay? So it could be that 2 hours is simply too long in children. To test that, we repeated the experiment, but now we have 15 minutes between the training on A and the interfering experience. Okay? And these are the results. Okay? And what we see is that there is very significant interference even in 9 and in 12-year-olds. So it means that both age groups before puberty are susceptible to interference. Okay? So this would say that before puberty, procedural memory consolidation requires less time to be stabilized. Okay, so before the process are completed. It's very important for me to say that in fact a very similar time course can be found in adults. And this can be found in adults if we allow them to sleep. So we train and we go to sleep and we are woken an hour and a half later and given an interference experience. No interference. Okay? So it seems to suggest that the mechanisms that are available for children before puberty are retained in the adult brain, but they are expressed only when we are sleeping. During the wake time, we have much longer, okay, after puberty, much longer time windows for interference. So if this is true, okay, then do children also express delayed gains earlier than adults? So we did the following experiment. We trained in the morning, okay, and then 2 hours after the initiation of this training, we look for delayed gains. And 4 hours, half the children will be tested, this is children and adults, will be tested at 2 hours, half the participants at 4 hours later, and of course we test everyone the next day. Okay? And these are the results. For young adults, it's the general result that I showed you before. They only express delayed gains after given a chance to sleep. Okay? However, in the children, which in this case were 10-year-olds, okay, what we see is that they express delayed gains already 2 hours after the initiation of the initial training session, and same gains are shown at 4 hours later, and they have additional gains during the night, okay, so that they're even better the next morning. Okay? So what I would argue is that there's no critical period of enhanced skill learning in children. Okay? But rather, what we see is a maturational difference in the conditions for generating long-term memory. Let me explain what I think how we can interpret these results. What I suggest is that in adults or after puberty, we see an implementation of a time consistency criteria. Okay? This is a mechanism, automatic mechanism of selectivity. Okay? And it goes like this. When B comes within 4 to 6 hours after A, in an adult's brain, it says, leave it. A, don't make long-term memory. Don't work on it. Stop. Okay? A is too transitory. Even 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours afterwards, you see that the movements required are not A, but B. Don't generate long-term memory for A. It's not relevant anymore. Okay? This is because A and B are conflicting information. However, in conflicting experiences. However, in the childhood system, it is still allowed to initiate consolidation processes for A, because all we ask for is consistency within a few tens of minutes. Okay? A few tens of minutes, that's enough. Let's make long-term memory. There was no competing experience. Let's make long-term memory. Which actually makes the adult system more selective, but not less effective. Okay? So, I'm going to very briefly now, and I know I'm running out of time, show you what happens in an age group which is very relevant for me. Okay? So for many of you it's irrelevant, but you might grow up, in short, you are going to grow up into this age group. Okay? So let me show you what happens in older adults. So the first result is really a shocking one. Okay? These are now 68 and older. Okay? Very healthy and elderly. Okay? And they're trained in the morning and show very nice learning. And then they show no delayed gains in the evening, but very nice retention. Okay? But no delayed gains the next day. Very, very sad. However, we did the very same training program. Okay, so it's identical here and here. But then we send our participants, this is a different group, okay, same age group, all the study is run in a sleep lab, everything is well controlled, and now we allow them a short nap. And voila, delayed gains. Okay? So of course, what would happen if we simply take our adults and not train them in the morning, but train them before they go to sleep? And the results are very, very clear. Okay? Very robust delayed gains. Just as high as the ones we see in young adults. Okay? So what's the point I would like to make? First, the point that I want to make is that what we are seeing here is not that as we mature and age, okay, it's not that our ability to retain new skills is reduced. What we do have is that our systems are becoming more selective, okay? In order to convince a brain like mine, with such a long history, and I have such a good repertoire of movements, that these silly movements that I've been training on for 25 minutes are important enough to make structural changes in my motor cortex where all my skills have probably left an imprint, okay? The conditions must be more severe, okay? There must be better control. And this is done in very simple manners. For example, by deciding that changes are going to be allowed only if they are kept consistent in our experience, in the animal's experience, for at least a few hours, or until we go to sleep, okay? So at least for this interval, until we go to sleep, it's relevant. Nothing has shown that this is irrelevant, okay? Then we make long-term memory as effectively as children, okay? So what we have is that puberty, and later on senescence, when we become older, brings more stringent selectivity to what is to be consolidated into long-term memory. But it is not a decrease in the potential to learn. The second point is that on a practical level, skill learning protocols that have been optimized for typical children and young adults may not be effective if we want to mobilize and express the potential for generating long-term memory in adults, okay, in the elderly, or in groups of individuals with some atypical development, okay, which I don't have time to go into. Thank you.